Hey Mama, I hope you are well. Welcome back to this week's episode of the Soul Mama podcast. It's me, Nahanda, and today I am bringing you a conversation with Kemi Johnson. Now, if anybody follows Kemi, also known as Kemi Birthjoy Johnson on Instagram, then you already know what you're going to be getting with this conversation. Kemi holds back no punches. She literally brings fire, she brings honesty, she brings rawness, she brings truth, and she says it how it is. So my intention in bringing Kemi onto the podcast was to really ground into what physiological birth is and to create a space for women who are pregnant or considering having another child to know and to trust that their bodies can do exactly what we've been told that we can't, which is to birth our babies naturally, without intervention, without harm, without the lies and the pressure that gets put on us when we enter into a hospital system. However, if you are pregnant at this time, or if you have experienced a traumatic birth, I do want you to listen with a little bit of caution because some of the language that is used can be very triggering. And I want you to be able to take care of yourself as you listen, because it brings up a lot of emotion. And I am a mother to a 9-year-old and a 5-year-old, and I still hold emotion from my births and the ways that I wish that they would have gone, the ways that they ended up, and what that hospital setting was like for me. And so just from that place, I'm just saying, be gentle with yourself, take pauses if you need to, skip over anything that you need to. Otherwise, be ready for the rawness that is this conversation between me and Kemi. Welcome, Kemi, to the Soul Mama podcast. It is such a pleasure to have you here. How are you today?
I'm really good. Thank you for having me. And I've been looking forward to this conversation. So let's go.
Let's get into it. So you are a mother, a grandmother, a birth keeper who was once a midwife. I would love to know how you came into this work. What moved you into it?
I think I was called in. It's quite apparent. My obsession started from the age of 15. So that's 42 years obsessed with childbirth. In my teens, I was just obsessed with it. I just thought it was amazing. And I woke up one morning with a calling to be a midwife. And I didn't know what that was at the time. I was just beginning to learn. And my dad knew what it was. And he said, "Oh, you mean obstetrician?" And I said, And I went away, looked up obstetrician. I thought, no, that's not me. I'm definitely not about... obviously, I do use my hands and my intuition, etc., to enable things to go smoothly. But I wouldn't say I'm fixing things in the same way as obstetrics does. Mm-hmm. I pushed back on being an obstetrician because I obviously was born with this inherent knowledge that women can give birth if they're undisturbed. And if if it's facilitated. So, yeah, I've been a doula, then a student midwife, then NHS midwife, then an independent midwife, and now I'm here as a birth keeper.
And so how do you differentiate between midwife, doula and birth keeper?
Right. So a doula, expert at reading a room, holding space, maintaining comfort, answering questions, education, support, cuddles, wiping tears, very practical. Mm-hmm. The midwife was slightly different. So I noticed as a midwife, my priority appeared to be like reading signs. If a woman felt like she was stuck or needed some help coming up with ideas, during the pregnancy, making suggestions about how to maintain great health, how to enable a thriving baby, how to navigate the system, etc. Even when I was in the NHS, I was trying to steer them off of beaten paths. Mm-hmm. So you imagine that was like, almost 2 decades ago. It was difficult. Okay, so a midwife, more looking at the physiology, the heart space of the woman, the mind space of the woman, able to palpate and foresee where the baby's looking. Doulas and midwives like me or birth keepers share that skill of biomechanics, so we can assist when it's needed. We work from the less is more paradigm. We don't force our ideas on people just because we think it's a great thing, or we want some practice or whatever, so midwives on the register, you can do vaginal examinations and everything. I don't seem to need those. I haven't done any for 4 years since I came off the register. We know what we're doing. So then the midwife is on the register, restricted as an NHS midwife by their employer, not the code. If you look at the code is good. The nursing and midwifery code. It's the NHS policies that are fucking women's lives.
Right.
Then we've got, then I came off the register anyway because, I just did better without it. 33 years ago, when I was giving birth, I went in as a black woman, underprepared, and got the full force of the racism in a London hospital. And they sabotaged my birth and ignored my cries or my wants or desires. And then this induction that I shouldn't have had, that I was unprepared for. So I knew all about physiological childbirth, and I thought I was going in to do that. I didn't realise that they were going to take me off into industrialised childbirth. And at 39 weeks, with my son not ready and my body not ready to open because prostaglandin hadn't worked on my cervix enough to ripen it enough for it to open fully. My oxytocin receptors, first time birther, were not proliferated throughout my uterus the way they needed to be, and they weren't sensitized to my own oxytocin like it needed to be. So then they felt they needed to give me synthetic oxytocin, which of course distressed my son. And then I ended with my cesarean. So it's learning. I was down with physiological birth, but I didn't realise what birth interventions were, and I didn't realise that the National Health Service don't care about mothers and their babies and will force them into interventions, coerce them, fearmonger them into interventions, and bully them along the augmented path. Bullying them along the augmented labour path, and then, taking you for surgery. I was the first woman in my lineage, from the first woman that gave birth, that I descended from, that we all descended from, all the way through the many thousands of years of black women giving birth in slavery, on boats, everything, in plantation barns, all the way to me. I was the first person that had their baby cut out of them, out of all those women, right? So, that passion.
I just want to give some space to the story that you shared about your son, because I think it's important not to glance over something that was, clearly a trauma, not only for yourself, not only for your child, but in the lineage that you came from. There was a severing of something that would otherwise be natural, otherwise have been unfolded, and that deserves space to be held. And so I'm really sorry that happened to you, but I can sense that was almost like the initiation that seemed to bring you into the fire space that you are in now, where you're like, listen, we cannot have women falling into this trap, because yours is not the first story and it won't be the last, unfortunately. And there are so many women, specifically Black and brown women, who I feel are going through the system naively, unaware, innocently expecting that it's going to do what it says it's going to do, i.e. support and protect them to have a healthy, natural birth and deliver a healthy, natural baby. And unfortunately, they are coming out harmed, either harmed with themselves, harmed with their children. And it's starting their motherhood journey off in a really depleted and tender way, because they are having to nurse wounds that they otherwise wouldn't have. So I wanted
Yeah.
to talk about your perspectives, having been inside of the system and now being outside of the system. Why do you think the system is not doing what it's supposed to do in terms of protecting women and supporting them to have healthy physiological births?
It's doing what it's designed for, which is not healthy women, healthy babies.
What is it designed for?
Depopulation.
Talk to me about what your perspectives are on this.
It's to weaken the human. Okay, so they're in it for the long game. I won't mention the two families that tend to come up when we're talking about modern medicine. But what we have, our maternity system is a product of modern medicine, medicalized birth. It's doing what it's designed to do. It's just that we thought it was for something else.
Right.
That's how we've been groomed. We've been groomed to believe that it's healthcare, but we've got to look very closely at the words we're using, because the road they steer you down isn't about health. Yeah, we get it confused. The system's about medicine and pharmaceuticals
Right.
and making us dependent on them, selling their drugs, selling their instruments, opening their theatres, getting money for doing all of that activity. If a woman just leaves her home, which obviously is the first problem, but if a woman leaves her home and then goes to a unit when she's in established labour and someone holds space for her while she gives birth in there, they might not be able to keep the lights on. Yeah, because they're paid for all the stuff they use.
Okay, so I'm hearing you say it's really by design set up to not allow the natural unfolding of birth.
Yeah,
Like from their perspective, a woman coming in, delivering a baby and leaving is not a success.
No.
And therefore that we're at complete odds in terms of what our desires are, because of women, we are going in with that expectation, with that promise that this is the safest place for us to birth. And then we're coming out with harm. And sometimes then the perceived gratitude that they've saved us from some harm that actually they've potentially caused. But the midwives and the doctors, in your perspectives, they're not aware of this agenda, right? Or do you think they are? Okay.
No, I think they're being played too.
Right.
The thing is, how we are noticing that many of us parents are waking up now.
Yeah.
It will never be the majority. It's just not how the story ends. The majority will probably not wake up. But there's a sizable minority of us that are going, hang on a minute. And the same thing's happening with the NHS staff. The majority are on rails, automatons. But there's a growing minority that are saying, hang on a minute, this isn't healthcare. Why am I participating in this? And then they're feeling a bit lost because they feel that they've got no alternatives.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So there are midwives and doctors in the system that are going, not quite sure this is what I'm supposed to be doing. But then they've got to pay their bills. The society in general, it's just you've got the upper echelons with their, endless money, and then you've got the rest of us. There used to be a middle class. That doesn't exist anymore, right? So they've got us kind of hand to mouth, one paycheck away from being homeless. They've got us like that, so that then they can say, I know that you think you're doing your job here for the mother and baby, but actually it's for our legal team, it's for our lawyers, it's for the managers and the directors, and people outside of the system that appear to be above it. Just so everyone knows what we're talking about, the system is a money machine, and the priority for them is money and control. And a broken human, especially if you can break the baby before it's even born, is you can control them better. Yeah. A broke family, you can control them better. You can, it all comes together. I promise
I
you.
can see it. I can see
Yeah.
it. And unfortunately, I've been in it in myself. And even with all of the knowledge and the intention that I had, I hired a Black elder doula to be with me in a home birth scenario. And I was still brought in to a hospital space. Thankfully,
Right.
I managed to maintain having a natural birth both times, give thanks. But I felt like I walked away the rarity. And the more women I speak to and I support, I've realized that that's true, because women are not coming away unscathed. They're not
No.
coming away unharmed. And
No.
even though the Embrace report came out, you know, with the statistics, and women are kind of aware that there is this issue specifically around racism inside the NHS and the way that that affects disproportionately Black mothers and babies.
Yes.
There is an increase in fear, but there doesn't seem to be an increase in home birth as a
Oh, yes, you've noticed
so
too.
it's like people are like they're aware and they're scared, which is then obviously compounding the physiological state that they're going into that
Yeah.
setting in.
Yeah.
It's making them aware of the potential downfalls that they're going to have when they experience, but they still doesn't seem to be the confidence to be able to say, I wish not to engage, or I choose to
Yes.
stay in my home, or I choose to
Yes.
call in someone like yourself to be able to support
Yes.
me in a different environment.
Yes.
I guess what I want to provide is for women who are planning to birth soon, either because they're pregnant or because they want to have subsequent children. Is home birth the only way that they can keep themselves safe and protect their babies? Is that your stance?
So the first bit of leverage I say to people whenever I'm speaking to them in my power sessions is, or you could stay at home. Right. But then when I say that, what flares up is all the grooming, that home birth is dangerous, etc. You can see they're doing it now because actually, you know, yes, there's still not enough Black and brown women voting with their feet, but there are more. It was so rare to come across a Black woman that was planning a birth outside of the system. Back when, you know, I started my obsession nearly 2 decades ago. And now I'm speaking to a Black or brown woman every day. Every day.
Which is fantastic. And so do you have statistics? Obviously, the very nature of home births, especially if those have chosen to free birth, which we can make a distinction of here for those who aren't aware, but that's to have no one present. That's to have it not monitored or supported.
Free birth has levels, right? So with free birth, you can just be with your lover, your beloved, or alone. There are women giving birth totally alone. There are people giving birth with their partners. There are people giving birth with their partner and doula, but it's without having a midwife, a registered midwife usually. Some people, when they have me, because I'm off the register, they will still call it a free birth. But then others will challenge that and will say, no, because she has all the tools and intellect available to help you out of a crisis in birth. I may not have gas and air because I have to be on the register to have gas and air, but I've got a ton of other solutions that have kept us for 4 years. I haven't looked after women who's used gas and air. So there's levels to free birth. So a home birth, would be expected that there's a registered midwife there, either an NHS one or an independent one.
Okay. And so because of the number of women who are choosing to potentially do that outside of NHS registered midwives, we don't have data, right? Are there statistics? So no one's monitoring them. There isn't a sense of how many or if, you know, there are dangers that happen and there are things that go wrong. There isn't any real way to collate that, is there?
So, we can't collate it, but you'll certainly hear about it, because if you're independent or a birth keeper or a doula and something happens on your watch, how will we know? Because the Daily Mail will talk about it. They will throw you under the bus. Your feet won't touch the ground, right?
Yeah.
So we don't need to be, you know, digging into stats. You'll read about it in the papers and online, right? it's the NHS death that is hidden. So we don't hear
Mm-hmm.
about that until, like, even, it only comes out because somebody leaks it. You won't hear about it. They'll barely get it into the papers. It's really hidden. You'd only hear about it when they're telling you the numbers in the embrace reports, and then you go, "Wow, really? That
Right.
many? That
And so
many
you're saying
babies?"
there's a continual warping of the narratives around the safety of hospital birth and the
Yeah,
danger of home birth
yeah,
in the way that it would be constructed and narrated in our media.
100%. Look at The Guardian,
Mm-hmm.
because I'm about to do a little piece about all the free birth news articles that have come out. There was one had the temerity to say, don't worry about what the midwives will do to you in there. Go in anyway. Wow, I praise what it said, but it was saying it doesn't matter. I know that they're cutting your perineums unnecessarily and cracking your baby's skulls with forceps, but still, it's more dangerous to stay at home with a free birth, and that's so. Yeah, it's a disgusting piece because actually, me just by my ear to the ground, holding my sessions, etc. Midwives talk to me. I know what's happening in the NHS because the NHS midwives are telling me, and I know what's happening in the free birth world. I know babies that are dead because the home birth midwife was there. It's my ear is to the ground. That's why I wake up with fire every morning because I know what's really going on. I know the breech babies that had to go to NICU because of the de-skilled birth centre midwives. I hear about it. Yeah. So, no, we're not keeping numbers, but I know exactly what's going on. That's why I keep telling people, I keep affirming what the Lancet studies in 2019 and 2020 already say, that women are much safer at home and babies are as safe born at home. They say as safe, right? But actually, they're not counting whether they get an optimal microbiome or whether they had their full blood complement with the blood transfer immediate post-birth.
Yeah.
Yeah. So wait for white, not delayed cord clamping. That's a compromise. Optimal cord care, relieving it till the cord is flat and white and not pulsating. That's not happening in the units. Even when you go in, you're in there 10 minutes and you cough out a baby, they'll still find a reason to cut off a third of the baby's blood volume forever, left in the placenta, not in the baby. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
That's why I just put the headline depopulation, because I refuse to believe the brainwashing is intense. I refuse to believe that my fellow clinicians in the NHS don't know what I know and can't facilitate what I facilitate.
I hear you. And even just, the two births that I have lived through, and
Yes.
that I had one of my best friend who I was able to support her through, all of which were in hospital settings. I feel like it's important to share that it is possible to protect that sanctity in that space, but it takes an awful lot of conscious, intentional advocacy, because I had to go back and forth with the chief midwife. I had to write away, rights and permissions and sign away the fact that I am managing my own birth. And therefore, if anything was to
Wow.
happen that was going to be of problem to my son or to myself, I was taking that liability away from them and owning that myself. I was literally like, wow, the level of fight that I'm having to hold to protect my space, which was really just to say, do not pre-manage me. Do not preempt that I'm going to go into crises. Let me birth the way that I trust myself and my baby
Good
and my body
woman.
to birth. And
Good
then if there's
woman.
anything that goes wrong, you have permission to support me, which is
Yeah.
what the support should be there
That's
for.
how it's
That's how it
supposed
should
to
be
be.
there.
But honestly, I commend you for going through that hell. You're obviously able to handle that kind of thing. Listen, you've got mammals that don't have conversations having straightforward births.
Yeah,
Why, just because you've got a neocortex, do we have to be jousting with the people that are supposed to be caring for
exactly.
us? And especially your hormonal balance during pregnancy affects your brain. You're
And
not
you're
supposed to have to box clever.
exactly that. And that was why when I held space for my best friend, you know, I kept her eye mask on, her headphones in. She was in her zone. And I
Strategies.
spoke to all of the staff and I said, do not touch her. She can do what she needs to do. She delivered that baby fine. And she came away from that like, oh my gosh, like everything was fine. What was the problem? What was the issue? Like,
and not does she? I hope she knows.
it's now that she knows.
Thank you.
It's
If you
literally
hadn't been there,
right.
Oh my God.
Listen.
It's like I had my ex-husband there with my first birth. Didn't know nothing.
Right.
So of course they ran ring round us all the way to theatre.
Yeah.
So you saved your friend.
Right. And
I hope she knows that.
At the time she was like, what is all this hype about birth? Like it was completely fine. I could do that again tomorrow. And I was like, babe, this is how you're supposed to feel. And this is what is supposed to happen, but it's not a guarantee. And she was the first of her NCT group. She was one of 10 in her group. She was the first one to give birth. She came home with her baby girl, healthy and happy. And she was the only one who went on to have a natural delivery. Every single one had trauma, had cesareans, had issues, are healing. And it was only when the last one gave birth that she called me back and she said, Nahanda, I realized what you did for me. I am so grateful, because
I'm glad she realized.
It was like the perception was like, of course, this is what's happened. This is what's supposed to happen. And I think it's the first time mothers who are being hit the hardest, because there is this sense that you don't even know what you're going into. And then what I'm finding with women is, because they may have had a traumatic birth first time around and maybe they ended with a cesarean, there's almost like a default, like, co-signing where they're like, do you know what, I couldn't manage the natural birth the first time around. I'm just going to go in now that I know what to expect and I know what the cesarean is like and I know how to prime myself and prepare myself. I'm just going to take that route second time around. And I'm like, it didn't need to be that way the first time. It doesn't need to be that way the second time. And it's the self-belief, it's the confidence, it's the faith. All of that gets interrupted and demoralized when you go through an experience where your power's been taken from you. You've lost your authority. You've given that away without even realizing, or it's been taken without your permission. And then you come away from that and having to process that and heal that, which often time you haven't had support or space to be able to do. And then it's affecting how they perceive their ability and potential for birth second or third time around. And so for me, the healing has to be continuous. Preparing for your birth has to take precedent, so that when you go into those spaces, if you choose to still go in there, you're going in with all eyes open, with people having your back, with your protection up, with your guards up, so that you know that you can come away going into motherhood intact, right? For yourself and for your child and for your subsequent children. And I don't feel like there is enough emphasis on how important that is.
I agree.
And so I just want to give some space for women who are, one, have either gone through that and do not want to go through it again, but are wanting to have a healthy, physiological, natural birth wherever they've chosen. What are the 3 things that they need to be focused on in preparation for that?
You need to be putting your money where your heart is. I know there's a lot of financial challenge happening at the moment, but people are going to need to box clever. Because if you want that, you're not going to get it out of the system. You might if you give birth in their car park, but once you get onto the labour wards, they're running to do anything they can to sabotage the birth. Let me give you an example, right? Most babies tend to be born after 39 weeks, right? So after 38, 39 weeks. The vast majority of babies that I've seen born are after 40 weeks, right? 41st week, 42nd week. A mother was going into labour at 35 weeks and I met her on the ward and she's doing beautiful. She just looks like a woman having a healthy baby. So they're wanting to continuously monitor, etc. She said, I'm not having that. So I started doing the low level advocating, like, oh, did you hear what she said? Oh, have you seen her birth plan? So they're a bit wary or whatever, but I'm just being very blunt. I'm saying, I know you have policies because she's 35 weeks pregnant because you've got your magical cutoff day of 37 weeks before a baby is term, but she's a healthy woman. She's got no challenges or whatever. So all that's going well. They're trying to get all these people in and saying, who's that? Who's that? You know, the usual stuff. Do they need to be in here? So why are they in here? So the midwife goes outside, comes back in with a coordinator, neonatologist and neonatal nurse and says, oh, we have to be here now because the baby's 35 weeks and the baby needs to go to the resuscitator. So I said, well, no, because we already know the studies have shown that the Nepalese saved like 100,000 babies just by keeping the cord attached.
Wow.
Surely you've read it. No, they haven't read it. So I actually found it and I sent it to the midwife. I said, you can share it with your team. That baby's having optimal cord care, so they don't need to be in here, right? This is a healthy woman having a healthy baby. It's a bit younger than what the NHS would like, but she's in the hospital in case the baby needs help. Would they leave that woman alone? Would they leave her to just have her baby? I said, so as they can't touch the baby, they may as well get out. They wouldn't get out. They said, but just stand by the door, right? So they stood by the door behind a curtain. Then the woman gave birth and I heard them fixing to draw back the curtain. Imagine to make the woman bleed, right? They were fixing to draw back the curtain and run and get that baby. So I said, stay behind the curtain. The baby's fine. And they said, but can we just check? The baby's fine. There are two midwives here. Do not come from behind that curtain. Wow. So I had to really get the bass in my voice because they can't stand for birth to go well with a baby coming out well, receiving their full blood complement and going to skin and a breastfeed. It's just not what they normally see. They feel they need to industrialize it. Surely we need to cut something. Surely we need to switch on a machine. Beep, 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 loud resuscitator. Surely we need to do that. Surely we need to wave some gases around. No, the baby's fine. And of course, the baby breastfed and she went home that day. This is why your role, what you did for your friend, those of us that are out there that are outside the system, not frightened by the system, that we've got a bass in our voice and can say things with our whole chest. We are needed inside of the units if a woman still, with all that she's seeing, still chooses to go there.
I hear you.
It's inexcusable. I'm going to go in, right? You can't have the best trainers be going to Jamaica every year, going to Ghana for December and everything, and you're not willing to invest in your birth preparation and who's going to be there for you. If you're going into the NHS, so if you're a first-time birther and you're going to the birth centre, I'm telling you, you're going to end up in the labour ward. They will find something. You're too fat, too black, your blood pressure's a bit on the high side, whatever. They'll find a reason to get you off of their ward. They're midwives. They should be able to cope if your pulse is raising, etc. But no, straight away, they'll shift you onto labour ward. And then you're done for if you don't have a doula, a bodyguard and a human rights lawyer. I'm not joking. I used to be less shrill. But as I'm seeing now, for first-time birthers, your cesarean rate is 70%.
Right.
Your first-time birther, you're going to be on the theatre table being cut open, 70%, right? So if you don't want that, but you're still leaving your house, you need to take all those people with you. Personally, I think the money's better spent on skilled help in your home, preferably from outside of the system. I'm talking about UK here. I know this is international, but if you get your free NHS care, I tell you it's not free, right? You'll end up paying the money afterwards for your birth trauma counselling or the amount of holidays you're going to need to take to try and feel better about what happened to you or whatever else. It's better if you're thinking about having children, please afford your children. Affording your children means making sure they're born in the best condition and that you are not broken, because then they've got a broken mother raising a broken baby. Is that you doing your best? Some people say, I'll die for my children. Okay, but will you go without your holiday for your kids? Will you go without upgrading your car for your kids? Yeah. It starts from before they're born. You have to do your best for your children. I've also, thank God, because I'm quite firm. It's like people sometimes say, oh, could you discount your prices? I say, oh, shall I discount my care then?
Mm.
I'll only give you 70% of the care. Yeah.
Mm.
Or pay 70% of the attention. It's rude. If me, single parent, I've managed to raise my children and they've had a good life, they've not gone without.
Yeah.
I've found it. If you're about to have children,
Mm-hmm.
if you're thinking about having children, you better be putting money away so that you can have great care.
Yeah.
At least if you're not going into the unit, you can save the cost of a bodyguard and a human rights lawyer, and you can just invest in a good doula or a birth keeper in your house.
I hear you, Kemi, and I think it sounds shocking because of the way that you are not sugarcoating the harm that happens, and the way that you are talking about the levels that you see that otherwise healthy women could have got away with not being harmed, but have been harmed. That is what is coming into the rawness of what you're communicating, and I want to bring it back to the faith that women can cultivate in themselves and their ability to be able to birth. I feel like there is a lack in confidence around our abilities. You know, I know women who have the potential to birth in other countries even, but they choose to come clean back here because of the perception that this is safer. You know, even on my home birth plan, I had a midwife come and say to me, because I'd had a postpartum hemorrhage with my first, that if you choose to have a home birth second time around with my son, you are going to make your children an orphan. And I literally had to ask this woman to leave my house while I broke down in tears. And my husband
Get out.
had to console me and be like, we can do this. We will find a way. We will make it happen. And that's why we ended up having all of these meetings and all of these backing and forthing. And I have to share that my birth was healthy. My child was healthy, and the postpartum hemorrhage, at which they were all pressuring me and all of this anxiety about, did not even happen. There was not one drop of blood.
What?
There was not one drop of blood when I had my son, naturally, without any interventions. And I
Wow.
turned around and I said, can you call the chief midwife, who I've had all of these meetings with, all of these high anxiety pressure meetings with during my pregnancy, when I should be in my peace and in my power?
That's right.
Can you call her in and tell her where we're at? And she was like, oh, it's so great. Like, I said, where are the statistics for the women like me? When I asked you, you're telling me the statistics of postpartum hemorrhage second time around, but you're not telling me what happens if I take that power back. You're not telling me where are the women who've opted not to go down your pre-planned route. She was like, oh no, we don't record that. And I was like, well, I need other women coming after me to know that it's possible. I've shared my birth story, but it's really important to know that you do have the power. A lot of my process in that pregnancy was communicating to my blood cells that they needed to close after the baby was born, because
the blood vessels.
I literally was like, the blood needs to be retained, and I need to not bleed out. And I visualized that, and I affirmed it, and I worked on that so much because there was all of this fear around it. And I'm not saying that, you know, that in and of itself is the thing that made the difference, but there was a deepening into confidence.
It would be your environment and how you feel about what you're doing. So it's really important that you took back your confidence and your power, because then that sewed into the environment that was created around you for you to have your birth. It's well known that home birth, the bleeding is minimal. We already know, there was a study a few years back that showed 2% hemorrhage rate at home, 16% in birth centres, and around 48% on the maternity unit. You know, the place where they give everyone the injection to actively manage the third stage. So everyone receives it on the labour ward because there's less blood loss. But if you go on to their postpartum ward, you'll see how many women are on there because of excess blood loss. So, you know, the mouth is saying one thing and the actions are very different.
Okay, so you're saying invest in a team, have the preparation from your pregnancy, call in the people who are going to hold that space for you. And if you can build up the confidence and the trust in yourself, choose to be at home, right?
Yes, please.
Anything else?
I can, I've mentioned a few times, And, obviously it's do as I say, not do as I do, but you have to have a good partner.
Let's talk about the partner's role.
Yeah.
What
if
is
you're
the
bringing
partner's role?
children into the world, some of us bring children into the world knowing that we're going to be single parents. Yeah. Some of us are single before the baby's even being born. Black single parent raising black boys in London. They needed a good father.
Yeah.
They survived. We all survived. But they really, and I can see these beautiful men now, they're 33 and 31, and makes me emotional. They've made such good lives for themselves, and they're such good husbands to their wives and such good fathers to their children. But they had it rough not having their father.
Yeah.
Not having that role model. I wasn't there getting all these uncles, etc. for them, but, a couple of male cousins, I asked them, please hold my children from the male perspective.
Yeah.
They didn't. They didn't have children themselves. They had things to do.
Yeah.
So my boys grew up with deficits that they have filled with bells on, but it made their lives harder. Being a single parent, I was much more broken. I was much, I soldiered on, but, I developed stress illnesses and things like that because I was carrying double what I needed to carry.
Without the support.
Yeah. So I just wish that all mothers would choose very carefully who they make children with. It's the peace.
Yeah.
Even like, some first-time birthers have preeclampsia, and, research is showing that the sperm it contributes to whether we suffer preeclampsia.
Wow, I didn't realize that.
I want us to take ourselves very seriously. Like, how do you pre-select with that? We fall in love, don't we? But it takes more than love to raise a child and
that role,
maintain a relationship, etc.
And it starts in the pregnancy. And I think this is why when I work with couples preconception, I always invite the partner to come on board, because often, even from fertility, the woman has taken herself as the one who's responsible for conceiving. And I'm like, which part? Like, it's both of you. Like, if you're going to be doing a detox or a womb cleanse or some kind of spiritual preparation, which is all of the things that I take couples through, your partner has a role in that as well. He is bringing his lineage, his DNA, his ancestral trauma and blessings. He's bringing all of that into this union. So let's start with how you mean to go on and bring both of you to account and hold that responsibility. So I'm very clear on how men can support their partners at each stage, whether it's fertility and conception, pregnancy, birth, and postpartum. But specifically for this birthing period, I feel like a lot of men, less so now in this generation than in times past, because there was a very clear divide between men not being in the birthing room and that being a women's space and women should hold the space. But now I think more men are actually willing and wanting to show up in that way.
They are.
And so how can we support the men who have that conviction and want to be there to protect their wives? What do they need to bring? Because I've got my thoughts on this, but I would love to hear yours.
Well, I've had it on a few occasions, and it's not for me to facilitate, but I've been wanting to facilitate partners speaking with each other, mostly male partners. I know there are female partners, but I've been trying to get them to speak to each other. And actually, I co-present on a podcast with Carmen Rocha, the Unleash Your VBAC Power. Our third series, which will be coming out soon, is partners talking about childbirth. Right? I know that about it's home births, most of them. Yeah, home birth after cesarean. So they had a few things they needed to stand for their birthing partner for.
Yeah.
I really feel like them being able to speak with each other, their voices going out on podcasts, maybe fathers who are optimal, holding mentoring for other fathers. I say some of my best people are men. So my dad, my sons, my brother, but people expect me to diss men.
Mm.
Tell me that story, you know, when that man fainted and whatever, to demean them, emasculate
No.
them. But no, but I always see my role as the opposite. I love uplifting men.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a single mother, yes, but it's not because I'm a man hater.
Mm-hmm.
I just had to take things in hand for my children. That's
Yeah.
why I chose my relationship for my kids' sake. Yeah, and I raised two kings, and they
Mm-hmm.
are kings.
Wow.
You know, I have the highest expectations of how they treat women, and they've exceeded that. They
Mm-hmm.
respect us. They, kiss me on my forehead and wish me happy Father's Day. They
Oh.
think women are amazing,
Yeah.
and it shows in their relationships.
Yeah.
So what I would say for sure is, men, start talking to each other if you can. See if you can be vulnerable with each other. And know that we love you and
Mm.
want you to raise your sons and daughters. We
Yeah.
want you close. And also knowing that, I know I don't speak for all women. There are women out there that don't want a man close to their children. Okay, so I know it goes both ways.
I definitely feel like raising healthy, whole families at this time feels like our greatest honor and privilege, and also, a complex challenge in the systems that we find ourselves having to navigate. And so
Yeah.
for me, the mission with my work and what I can hear coming through with your work and others that I've chosen to have on this podcast is that we are holding that line to pour into the families so that children can come up in their full selves, in their wholeness, in their beauty, in their majesty, in their health, and in their vibrancy as they were, called to come in.
Yes.
And so for women, what would you say is one gift that you would give to women listening?
Oh, don't. It's making me emotional.
It is emotional because it's deep. It's deep work.
You're a queen.
So are you.
Honestly, what a great question.
Oh.
Yeah, I just want women to remember that you're royal. And we're not going to get none of this done without unity. So I'm Black royalty. You're Black royalty. There's Asian royalty. There's white royalty. Yeah. Some people feel like, Bun Babylon with the Western countries or whatever. And yeah, our governments just like,
let's not even go there.
It's not easy. Yeah, they're really trying to kill us. But the people on the ground are gold. Yeah, some of my ride or dies are white. They're my ride or die. Okay, so I don't go and just look for safety in the Black community. I know my safety. I feel safe everywhere. Okay?
I love that.
So I just want us to have unity, to remember your royalty, but not the off with their head kind of royalty. Be compassionate, clever, soft living royalty. Honor yourself. Don't drop your standards and be dishonored by others. Yeah, keep your standard high. If somebody doesn't recognize your royalty, that's okay. Let them go, please. Just try and honor yourself, honor others. If people are dishonoring you, you must move them out of your life. You must. We are all royalty, but we just need to know when something's not for us. Women, mothers, you can do hard things. Yeah, that's one thing I just want you to think on. And mothers, birth, life, death, they're all blessed, sacred experiences. You don't need to fear death. Do not. And I know we've been talking about birth, but a lot of us are controlled because of fear of death. Look into that, because there's one thing that's certain, is that we're all going to die at some point. Okay. So we need to get comfortable with that. And I think also if we get comfortable with that, we get our power back.
Because no one's holding that over us anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah. It is a real willingness to face that, because birth is that real thinning of the veil into the other side of life. And I see it like you're going to retrieve your child and hopefully come back earthside, both of you. But you have to be willing to go there. I do think what you're saying there is such an integral part of being able to prepare yourself for the depths that birth can bring you through.
Yeah.
Thank you, Kemi. I really appreciate your time, your energy, your wisdom, and your work. For women who want to follow you and get in contact, how can they find you?
They can find me hanging out on Instagram as Kemi Birthjoy Johnson, all one word. Or you can catch me on TikTok as Birthjoy Kemi.
But you mentioned your podcast as well. Remind us of the name.
Oh, the podcast I share with Carmen Rocha. She went and had a vagina birth after 2 cesareans.
Wow.
And she's mouthy. She's South African. We're both African women who don't play. So we've got a podcast called Unleash Your VBAC Power.
Brilliant.
We've honed in on that specifically because we absolutely know that women are being lied to and told that if they've had one cesarean, it's always a cesarean. And so we're there busting all kinds of myths on that podcast.
Brilliant. Well, I look forward to joining you over there. And
Thank you.
Just to hearing more of your voice and more of your work, because you're doing such important work in the community. And I thank you for that. And yeah,
thank you.
I really hope that women listening can remember their power on their journey of motherhood and know that they can trust themselves and their bodies and their babies.
Yes, they really can.
Thank you, Kemi. Appreciate
Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening to that conversation. I found it really moving and really confronting, just understanding her perspectives and really knowing the experience and the wisdom that she has moved through the birth world with, having been within the NHS and now being outside of the NHS. There is so much that she's borne witness to, and I think that really fires her emotion and her perspectives. And so I really pray that it's given you some confidence if you are thinking about birthing outside of the system, to be able to invest in someone like Kemi, to be able to call in support from people who know what the terrain is, and to be able to trust in your body and in your baby that you can birth without intervention, without pressure, and without harm, because that's the biggest intention, that we start motherhood off in a way that doesn't leave us broken, doesn't leave us traumatized. And so if anything has come up for you in this conversation, I want you to go back to my conversation with Sakina Ballard, where we speak about how to heal from birth trauma. We didn't have space to go into that here, and I knew that I had another conversation in the podcast that dealt with that specifically. So I really suggest you go and listen to that. And if you need any extra support, please reach out to myself or to Kemi or to anyone who supports women through resolving birth trauma. It's my intention that these conversations, although challenging, uplift you and remind you of your power. And so thank you for listening. Thank you for being here. Connect with me online at Soul Mama Journey on Instagram and at the website where you'll find show notes to each of these conversations. And I look forward to touching in with you again soon. Stay blessed.